Headlights on the highway. If you only knew, being back here always makes me think of you.
그게 누군가요? 응? 이거 그대로 손이나 주셔야지.
I remember the long drives, the late nights in your car. I remember it all. Windows down, empty streets. You were all I used to know. You and I, forever, forever ago. And you used to drive me home. Now I drive alone. You and I, forever, forever, forever ago. This town's so quiet, this time of year, with the road ahead's coming back again, coming back to me. I remember the long drives, the late nights in your car. I remember it all. Windows down, empty streets. You were all I used to know. You and I, forever. Headlights on the highway. If you only knew, being back here always makes me think of you. When the world is sleeping, do you think of me? With the road it's coming back again, coming back to me. I remember the long drives, the late nights in the car. I remember it all. Windows down, empty streets. You were all I used to know. You and I, forever, forever ago. And you used to drive me home. Now I drive alone. You and I, forever, forever, forever ago.
the afternoon. I don't know what I'm to do. I just miss you more than anything. It's way too quiet in the house. I'm just wasted on the couch, 'cause I don't wanna feel anything. Wish you'd stayed here beside me. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Wish you'd stayed here right with me. I can't shake that feeling that we said goodbye too soon. I know the hour's getting late. I shouldn't sit here contemplating. I just can't stop thinking about us. I won't forget a single thing, from drunken nights to Sunday mornings, and how you smile at me. Wish you'd stayed here beside me. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Wish you'd stayed here right with me. I can't shake that feeling that we said goodbye too soon. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Wish you'd stayed here right with me. I can't shake that feeling that we said goodbye too soon.